Cops of Reddit. What's the most bullshit sounding excuse you got that actually turned out to be true? One of the funnier ones that I remember. We got a call for a kid. He was 18 and a gang member, brandishing a firearm. He had pulled up his shirt pretending to brandish a firearm to intimidate somebody. The person calling only saw a holster. After we got there, he kept telling us it wasn't a gun but a dildo. We took him down at gunpoint, and he was right. He was walking around with a holstered black dildo. Why? Because he could. Haha. My dad is an officer and he pulled someone over for speeding and running a red light, and they said their breast implant burst. He called IMS to rush them to the hospital, and turned out it did, and it's actually very dangerous if they leak. Edit. Thanks for my first silver. Not really an excuse, but shocked the shit out of me. I've always been told a diabetic with high blood sugar acts the same as someone who is drunk. Get a call for a car all over the road, hitting trash cans on the side of the road and whatnot. We stop the car and get the driver out. He's slurring his speech like no other. Can't maintain his balance to save his life. Fails all the sobriety tests, but blue zeros on the PBT. He denied drinking and swears up and down he didn't do any drugs. Never mentions the diabetes. We're all scratching our heads and I remember the blood sugar thing. Call medical to our location and sure as shit his blood sugar was 550. And he finally remembers that he hadn't taken insulin in 8 hours. I used to work as a military police officer. I was working at the main gate one night and this guy tried to come on base, but he didn't have any ID other than a driver's license, so I couldn't let him on. The guy told me that a general said he could come on, but he didn't have any proof of that, and he didn't know what the general's name was. It was also super late at night and he didn't seem to have any answers that would help us identify who he was. Long story short, the dude ended up being legit and was coming on base to be awarded a silver star the next day from that general. Edit. Since a few of you guys are asking what he earned the silver star for, I did some digging and found this for you all to read if you're interested. Also, turns out I was wrong about the silver star. This guy had a silver star already and was being upgraded to a Navy Cross. https://valor militarytimes.com/hero/3765. Something similar happened to my dad once. He was working the main gate. Dude comes up to him without ID. Asks my dad to let him in. My dad refused. Turns out the guy was some kind of big shot in the army, and my dad got to spend some time in military jail. As far as I remember, the guy actually came to him, apologized and said he did everything right. Was doing a tour as an MP, not my normal job, but whole other story, and we got called on a domestic. At the house, there is this huge con-fed guy about 6'4" and 275. And a petite Asian girl about 4'10" and 95 pounds soaking wet. The whole house was in disarray, and the call had come because of yelling heard by the neighbors. She was crying and talking in an Asian language that none of us understood, and kept gesturing toward her huge husband. He wasn't talking. We wrap him up, take him to the station, and are trying to interview him, but he's not saying much. We intend to charge him with domestic assault. We noticed somewhere along the way that he has horrible welts all along the backs of his hands and along his forearms. It took a lot of prying, but we finally got out of him that his wife would beat him with wire coat hangers when she was mad, and apparently that was pretty often. He was too embarrassed to admit to anybody that he was being abused by his wife who was less than a third of his size. We finally got it straightened out, turned her over to the local police, and barred her from base. Hopefully the guy got the help he needed. Not a cop. Family friend was. Pulled a guy over who was speeding profusely. Guy was obviously disheveled. He said he was headed to the hospital because he had a tick on his penis. Cop was confused, but he escorted him there, then waited in the lobby to check on him/see if he was blowing smoke. After a while, he asked the desk what was going on, why it took so long to take a tick off his penis. Her reply, it wasn't on it, it was in it. Former cop here. I was behind a vehicle that couldn't stay in the lane, kept swerving, etc. It was 1 AM. and I think another drunk idiot on the road. Pull him over. Guy is a straight up asshole to me. Cursed me out, yelling at me, and I notice his speech is slurred. I get him out to car, and I can smell a fruity smell on his breath, and he has to lean against the car for support. I ask him how much he had to drink, and he tells me to fuck off. By this point I'm ready to bring him in for a DUI, but I just had a feeling something wasn't right. I called EMS to come check him. Blood sugar was at 40, not drunk, just a diabetic. If I would have arrested him, he probably would have died before I finished the paperwork. Go with your gut if something doesn't seem right. I once saved a diabetic guy like that too. Though I'm not a cop, I was just a train traveler on a packed train station, eating my freshly bought fries, when an elderly couple arrives. The man seemingly drunk and the woman cutting the line asking for a Coca sap. The person at the counter was super annoyed, ignoring the woman at first then telling her to go to the back of the line. She doesn't listen. I see the man slowly getting worse, and I step in and tell the person to give her a Coke now, she'll pay later, or her husband's gonna die. Cue super shocked faces OFC. She got a Coke. Man drinks half of said Coke before he's unable to cause he's literally just fighting off unconsciousness by now. But thank God the half Coke is enough, and he gets a little better in 5 minutes. Drinks the rest. The woman pays, and we talk a little. She asks me how I, a teenager, knew what was going on. I learned because my brother was diabetic. I had seen my fair share of low blood sugars by that time. Was really glad I could help, because if I hadn't stepped in he would have been in the hospital. My first ever real call was for a flasher at the local park. When I got there and finally found him, it was a mentally impaired young man 16 to 17 who had a pair of headphones on and a full Pooh Bear. I said, hey man, come here, what the hell is going on? You know you have to keep your pants on, especially at the park. He goes on to tell me he had bad itching down his pants and couldn't take it anymore, so he had to rip his pants off and was running home to get help. I said, come on, you couldn't make it home first. He said no, I had ants in my pants. As sure as shit, according to more than one witness's account. He had been sitting in a sandbox playing at the park and accidentally on a nest of red ants that had crawled up his pant legs. I love that this was your first call. I'm running booking one night. Guy gets brought in for possessing a truly stupendous amount of drugs. Him talking like 2 Rubbermaid totes full of shrooms, a huge bag of weed, and enough heroin to overdose half the county. Well, says he, I'm a informant, and they told me to make the drop so they could be there and raid the crap out of everybody and let me go for helping. Right. Face left please. Guy is like, I'm telling you dude, they're gonna be super pissed that you country retards fucked up by a bust. Whatever. Get in the holding cell and shut up. About 3 hours later 3 guys show up. D agents. Fear super pissed that our deputy's fucked up by a bust. I go back to the holding cell to let the guy out, and he's just like, fear super pissed, huh? Yeah. Told you so. Apostrophe. I had a similar call to this one night. I was on patrol, running traffic, and ran a tag through the state's DMV system. Tag comes back immediately with the DHS warning, tone and everything, alerting that the driver was on the terrorist watch list and advised not to make contact with the driver under any circumstances. I thought maybe I'd run the wrong plate, so I tried it again. Sometimes the tags are hard to read and things show up wrong. The tag returned again as the driver being on the no contact list. I was about to advise dispatch that of the situation when they raised me on the radio, saying someone from DHS had called about me running the plate twice and demanded that I not make contact with the vehicle. Needless to say, I left him alone. But it was crazy spooky how fast they called after I'd run the plate. Serious watchdogs. Not a cop, but I did get stopped by one for eating a taco. I worked at a community college in LA that had a high school right next to it. Well, there was a lot of drugs sold through the fence at the high school, so there was always a cops driving up and down the street between the schools. Couldn't get a parking pass since I just worked at the school, so I always parked on that street. Hit up Taco Bell for lunch and was sitting in my car eating my double-decker tacos when a cop drove past. Next thing I know he's flipping a U-turn and heading right for me. He slides to a stop driver window and yells at what the hell do you think you're doing? Stunned I just said eating my lunch. Well he isn't buying it and says I'm hiding something. I just hold up my taco and looked so confused. He burst out laughing and peeled out. Saw him a few times after that and he always waved and had the biggest grin on his face. My friend had something similar happen. He got a burrito he'd been craving and had it in his lap. At a stoplight he's looking down at the burrito salivating over it when a police pulls over and tells him to get off his phone. He just lifted up the burrito and the officer laughed and drove away. The way he tells it crackers everyone up. Also this was a story I heard years ago so sorry if the details are wrong. Edit. Lol at autocorrect. I'm leaving it. Popped a college kid for shitty driving and pulled 100 grams of weed off of him. Also, a 1-pound glass pipe shaped like a huge nail. No biggie. Also find weed under the other college kids in the car. Driver falls on the sword and tells me all of it is his and lets his friends walk free. I like this kid. However during the search we find packaged Addies in the cellophane of a cigarette pack with the top melted closed. Ask kid if has dealing Addies at school. Tell him I am aware of the prescription pill epidemic. He says no and spins a huge yarn about how he only carries a few on him because has had his orange pill bottle stolen so many times. Kid seems like a pretty good dude. I decided to take the X-Files approach. Supervisor tells me pursue charges for dealing. Blah blah blah. I tell the kid he has one chance to prove he's telling the truth. Shows me the broken glass under his driver's seat from a vehicle burglary. Gotta do better. I follow behind him back to his dorm. He lets me in and shows me the busted footlocker he kept them in under his bed. Dunno. Kinda weak. Supervisor's telling me to hurry and drop the axe. Tell him to do better. He calls one of the soccer team assistants up and we meet him in the locker room. Shows me the little wooden locker which has a broken lock. Assistant coach tells me they have replaced the lock on his cabinet 3 times. Campus security has numerous reports of medicine theft from this kid. Nice. I call supervisor up and tell him I have no grounds to pursue delivery charges. Poor bastard just kept getting his Adderalls jacked and being the big dumb meatball he was. He started packaging them like that. I end up talking to his best friend breaking up a house party a couple months later. Friend tells me kid is a stand-up guy who only uses weed due to extreme anxiety. Totally believable from my interaction with him and has never sold anything in his life. Friend thanked me and told me his buddy spoke well of me. Friend also tells me he had to drive his buddy to the hospital a few hours after I left from a panic attack due to the whole incident. I felt bad for the kid. So now, whenever I see him smoking up in his car in the mall parking lot I just wave. Thanks for the gold. I'm honored. But it's not needed. Put it in a savings account. Money is a bitch to get. So hold on to it. If you have to part with it, donate it to Street Jude's Children Research Hospital. They do good shit there. Not a cop, but I had a run-in with one that was really funny once. When I was 18, I was on a double date with a friend, and we stepped out of a restaurant to smoke. A cop came up and started harassing us, telling us there had been break-ins into cars in the area. Eventually, he said he needed to pat us down, and he pulled a brown paper bag out of my friend's pocket. He got a smug look on his face and asked, "So, what's in here, huh?" My friend said, "The Emancipation Proclamation," with a completely straight face. The cop opened the bag, pulled out a small booklet, got embarrassed, and let us go. My friend had been to the Lincoln Museum earlier that day and did actually have a small copy of the Emancipation Proclamation in his pocket. Mid-July in like 2008. Young kid going 93 in a 55. I swing and he immediately pulls over, approaching the car. His first words, before I can even start speaking: "My dog died. He hung himself. I gotta get back before my mom gets home." What? JPG anyway. He calls other family members. His aunt, uncle and 2 cousins come out to the stop, and between all their sobbing, they verify that the dog had actually hopped over the fence on a leash/runner and couldn't get back over. Everyone's crying now. They showed me a photo on their phone. Apparently they found the dog and called the kid at work and he just left. I didn't even bother verifying further than that. Cousin drove the kid's car back so they could take care of the dog and prepare for mom. Some said that I should have wrote him, but losing an animal sucks enough. He knew he fucked up and adding financial burden to him wasn't going to help him or me. Had a domestic in progress I responded to during Christmas Day, and the excuse for them fighting was we are not mad at each other. We are just upset because we wanted to surprise the kids for Christmas. We got some deer, dressed them up. Now they are destroying our house. Turns out there was literally 3 fully grown white-tailed deer in the house, somehow dressed with full bell harnesses like Santa's reindeer. I had to call the game wardens down, who were then able to help me remove the deer from the property without injury to us or them. How they managed to get the deer and dress them up is still a mystery to this day. I was driving with my fiancé and we went through a roadblock where they checked registration and shit. And we get to the cops and they ask for our registration. I'm sitting in the passenger seat, so I open up the glove box and right there is a clear, unmarked baggie filled to the brim with catnip. I completely forgot it was there and just froze. Wide-eyed. I turned to look at the cop shining his light through my open window and he's frozen too. Just staring at the baggie with this look on his face like, really? I just started immediately professing, OMG, I swear to God this is catnip. You can take it and smell it or test it or whatever, like, I swear. And at this point it's just so ridiculous that I start cracking up, and the cop takes it and reasonably deduces I'm telling the truth. And he starts laughing and calls his partner over and tells her what happened, and they both just cackled away for a minute and sent us on our way. I went to a disturbance at a backyard BBQ once. Turns out it was a bunch of Roma gypsies. As I was trying to figure out what was going on, I had some old lady approach me and want to talk to me off to the side. She told me she was an informant for the FBI and that if I left, she would be able to get some information on a matter the FBI was interested in. I rolled my eyes and thanked her and said I would be out of there as soon as I could make sure there was no violence going on. Anyway, I determined it was just verbal, so I cleared the call and went back in service. About 15 to 30 minutes later, dispatch radioed me to head back to the station. I got there and got a message to call some FBI field office and ask for a certain agent. I called and sure as shit this agent said he understood I spoke with his informant and wanted to know everything she told me. Blew my mind. My dad was a cop and my favorite story of his goes like this. He's a young cop in a rough neighborhood. It's so late that the stoplights are flashing red, meaning treat it like a stop sign. Out of nowhere this pink caddy goes rolling through the intersection. My dad pulls him over. A big black dude was driving. The caddy had fur interior, dice in the mirror, a real pimp car, if you know what I mean. My dad goes, sir, do you know you ran that light back there? And this guy says, officer, I do believe I got between the flashes. My dad was laughing so hard he had to let the guy go.